Volume 1, Chapter 52. The Three Holy Nights. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. Race. Goblin Level. 8 Class. Lord, Horde Chief. Possessed Skills. Ruler of the Horde, Insurgent Will, Overpowering Howl, Swordsmanship B+, Insatiable Desire, King's Soul, Ruler's Wisdom Eyes of the Blue Snake, Dance at Death's Border, Red Snake's Eye, Magic Manipulation, Soul of a Crazed Warrior, the Third Chant, Instinct, Ruler's Wisdom 2, Divine Protection. Goddess of the Underworld Attributes. Darkness, Death Subordinate Beasts. High Kobold Hesu, LV1, Gastra, LV20, Cynthia, LV20, Orc King Bui, LV36, leading the way through the maze-like forest was Gilmy. We are called the Goblins of the Beginning, quietly said Narsa, who was beside me. The solemnity of her voice was like that of an ancient Miko. It said that we goblins were born from the land of the dead, from which we then came into this world. Is she talking about the goddess of the underworld Altesia? The deceased Dietna, our mother goddess, our soul foundation. Reminds me of the legend Reshia spoke about. In that legend, the gods wished for Dietna's return from the land of the dead. And she did, only, she came accompanied by monsters and magical beasts. It seems the legend Reshia spoke of was also passed down to the monsters. A coincidence. But our god, Dietna, was defeated, and the one who came to rule the land of the dead was Altesia. It was through the mayhem reaped upon the world by her rampage and through her dreadful power that she conquered our land. And then she challenged the world of humans once more. And so the living and the dead fought once more, But again we lost. When she ran to this land, she left us but one command before leaving us behind. Protect the fortress of the abyss, she declared. Do so and your king shall be born. Just how much passion was there in those words that you would actually shake as you utter them? What lies in your deepest thoughts? Narsa. And when that day comes, we shall awaken, and we shall clash against the humans once more. It's a little different from the story Gilmy gave. And? I asked. This prologue's too long. I just want to hear the conclusion. The four tribes together protect that which is sacred. So in order to protect the fortress of the abyss, each of us received a treasure from the gatekeepers of the land of the dead. I heard shouts from the right flank, but I just left it to Gi Guverbina. That treasure is their objective, said Narsa. Shouts rose from the left flank, but the trees are blocking my vision. I have no choice but to trust in them. But why only now? I asked. Wasn't the war over 400 years ago? It's because they can't wait anymore. So they thought to acquire the king with their own hands. Bitterness seemed to permeate Narsa. At that moment, although they couldn't possibly have been simply waiting for those words to be uttered, the Gaidga goblins appeared. Acquire the king, Like dolls without will. The king is me. Someone who was only put in the position by others isn't a king. Gi Za, I'll leave it to you, I ordered. No problem, fearlessly smiled the druid chief, Gi Za, as he charged from my side toward the fray. Following from behind him was a lump of magic-wielding goblins. Under Gi Za's lead, colorless winds and blue water attacked the Gaidga goblins. Gaidga's chief is Rashka, child of Mishka. He is my fiancé. I see. I might be able to make use of that. Narsa only hung her head down without even wondering what I was thinking. Expel them quickly, and take back the village of Ganra. I commanded. Regardless, whether it be those four treasures or the king you all desire. I will take everything back. I looked at the goblins under my control. Gilmy, search the surrounding area. Yes. The treetops are home to the Ganra goblins. Narsa seemed to be enduring something as she grasped her small fist tightly while watching the situation before her. Like a human, I narrowed my eyes at her behavior. For better or for worse, dealing with humans might be better than dealing with goblins. Then I looked at the bitter battlefield. There I could hear cheers sounding out in several places. For the meantime, it seems that we've achieved our objective, I muttered. Gilmy, who was searching the surroundings from atop a tree, went down to report. Looks like the Gadga goblins have withdrawn, he said. I gave a large nod to the Ganra goblins' commotion. Get some food, and keep vigil watch of the surroundings. This much should be fine, right? I said with a sharp, commanding gaze. Narsa, seemingly unable to resist my gaze, reluctantly nodded her head. If that atmosphere had to be expressed in a word, then the word extravagant would best fit. Polished marble upon which red carpet was laying, extending straight toward the deepest room, toward the throne of the king. In which tapestries knit by the most skilled of tailors over a period of several years were draped over the walls. In which a chandelier inlaid with jewels, lighting the place bright through magic stones, hung from the ceiling. And in which beautiful stained glass unseen even in the West Church were affixed to the windows, allowing the light passing through to match with the men in the room, creating an atmosphere of reverie. Benove calm, it was the throne room, in which the king met his guests. And sitting on that throne was an old man known to the neighboring countries as a majestic king. Ashtal du Gelmian. He is the master of the kingdom in the western side of the continent, whose border stretches from the Forest of Darkness to the south. On either side of the red carpet stood the cornerstones of this nation, the nobles, the bureaucrats, the soldiers, and the merchants. They stood there like walls, not letting out even the slightest tremor of a cough. In that room, only one thing prevailed, and that was none other than the dignity of the king. The holy knights have arrived. Suddenly, within that strained atmosphere, like the sound of something snapping, those words echoed. The king looked on at the door before him as it opened. And from it entered 3 men dressed in armor. One was a man past middle-aged. With a face of sophisticated features, a straight back, and silver hair almost white, he gave off the image of a butler. However, the sharpness that lay within his gaze refuted any such notion of him being one. As he rubbed his mustache, his presence overawed the surroundings. Another was a young man. His arrogant gaze swam left and right. His body was built like a rock, and was dressed in armor. His jaws seemed as if they could crush even steel, and in his ferocious blue eyes could be seen an ambition burning. Even his short-trimmed hair seemed to be facing the heavens, standing against it. The last one was a long-haired man dressed in red armor. The beauty of his dazzling, long, golden hair made it easy to mistake him for a woman. His slender body had white, porcelain skin that seemed as if it hadn't once felt the touch of the sun. Although he looked like a woman, a sarcastic smile drifted up his lips as his narrow eyes looked down on the surrounding people. Gohan Ranid, Gulen Rifneen, and Jean Marlin has arrived to answer to the king's call. As the middle-aged man knelt before the king, the other 2 followed. The king raised his arm that was like a dead tree, and he signaled for them to relax. What does the king require of us? The holy knights are the kingdom's greatest military asset. For 3 out of 7 to be summoned to the king, they knew very well just how urgent the matter at hand was. From the south to the southwest is the Forest of Darkness. In the north is the mountain range of the god of Snow Yggdrasil. In the east is the holy Shushana kingdom. And in the south-east is the Lord's alliance. For this country, who is surrounded by all those, it prizes strength the most. And the ones to have reached the apex of that pursued strength are the 7 holy knights. A request came from the West Church, said the king. Upon hearing that, Gohan, who was still kneeling, immediately understood the details of their task. Find the saint, said the king in a low voice. Each of the 3 assented through the expressions on their faces. Bring her back alive at all costs, commanded the king. By your will, replied the 3 holy knights. Satisfied, the king dismissed them. Reshia fel zeal, Zenobia's saint, was it? Just what on earth are those people from the church thinking, I wonder? This is a secret, but the ivory tower actually pressured this kingdom. The ivory tower is overflowing with exceptional magicians and bureaucrats. So even though this kingdom has a number of exceptional people under its employ, it doesn't dare sneer at the ivory tower's strength. Yet that ivory tower and the West Church itself requested for a search to be done for the sake of but one girl. A fortuitous, yet at the same time, worrying existence. If she's alive, then find her, and bring her back. As a flame blazed within Ashtel's sunken eyes, he smiled. I wonder what our king is planning, asked Jean as he walked while playing with his long hair. Having been dismissed from the presence of the king, he neither bothered to control his frivolous lips, nor did he bother to hide the twisted impression he gave off as a sarcastic smile rose upon his lips. You don't really care though, right? In any case, how about we start by looking for some prey in the forest? It's been a while since I've had the pleasure of hunting after all, ferociously laughed the man who was known as Golan. As a knight with great stature who is also known as the Storm Knight, there is no one superior to him when it comes to handling a great sword. What do you think, Gramps? Asked Jean with a smile to the older knight that was walking in front of them. Golan, the oldest amongst the holy knights, and the one that supposedly had the most achievements amongst them. The ivory tower and the church obviously pressured him into it, said Golan as he looked at the two behind him. That gaze he sent them, he didn't look at them with sober eyes, no. Rather he looked at them with a gaze that could be said to be extremely cold. It was a freezing gaze that seemed to be looking down on something utterly worthless. Jean's smile twitched. As expected of the strong, armed knight, your eyes are amazing. In fact, your gaze doesn't even feel human anymore, said Jean as he looked at Golan with ridiculing eyes. If one were to take a closer look, then it could be seen that Golan's left hand was actually a boorish, metal arm. As Golan stopped walking, Jean also stopped, and he took some distance. You want to try, Gramps? My fire is fast, you know, said Jean as he lightly placed his hands on the thin sword by his waist. His movements were natural, and frighteningly enough, there were no openings in his movements. He was always ready. Ready for any prey that might come attack him. We should stop. There's nothing interesting in fighting amongst ourselves even if Golan finds it amusing, expressionlessly said Golan as he sent his gaze to the tall, brawny man. What, so you're not doing it? And here I thought I'd be able to kill the wounded one, laughed Golan in a low tone as Jean shrugged his shoulders. You're just no good at judging character, said Jean. As he heard those words, Golan began walking again. Jean and Golan glanced at each other once, and then they too began to walk. Fighting here would only bring them harm. If they're going to fight, then they might as well fight from the start, and win. The both of them were also well aware that this was the wisest course of action. The captive princess, Reshia Felzeal, was it? For the meantime, why don't we go and rescue her? As Jean lightly said that, the other two ambiguously nodded. Author's note. I changed the perspective a bit, and put in a story from the human kingdom. Villains sure are nice, huh? Volume 1, Chapter 52.33. Gossips. The one who chose the spear. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Name. Giga Rax Race. Goblin Level. 87 Class. Noble, Guardian Possessed Skills. Spearmanship C+, Overpowering Howl, Omnivorous, Instant Kill, Adherent of the King, Spear Throwing, Warrior's Soul Divine Protection. None attributes. None due to the right arm and abnormal the left leg being status unavailable. Fighting power reduced by 60%. After seeing the chief off, Giga gave his thanks to Giga, his support in the coming days. Then with a sword for a cane, Giga walked with great difficulty. With the chief gone, Giga was now the highest classed goblin in the village. Despite that he could not be counted as part of the force, a truly shameful fact. With his remaining left arm wielding his spear, and with his right leg, skipping, he was somehow able to move. Everything now was inconvenient. When eating he had to put down his spear before he could chew on the meat. When trying to hold something, he would have to pierce the spear into the ground, before he could grab it. Goo, it's an honorable wound from protecting the king. He knows that. He's not regretting that. But with him and the other goblins who have lost some limbs, growing weaker by the day, their food supply was getting thinner and thinner. If things were to continue at this rate, then they would surely die. Not even one of them could walk on their own just to eat. It's vexing. Didn't he only lose an arm and a leg? Why does he have to die because of something like that? To die peacefully outside of war, something like that shouldn't be forgivable. The king said. Stand with me once more, and fight. If so, then. His duty now was to show the king that he could fight with only an arm and a leg. He gritted his teeth. He filled the spear he was using as a cane with strength. Then using the recoil, he freed his body for a moment. Within that small interval, he took his spear, and swung it sideways. A swing strong enough to scythe down the wind. But that was all. After that swing his body couldn't handle the recoil, and he fell to the ground. When he did, he unconsciously reached out to his wounds. GI, fire spread before him. The pain was so great he began to hallucinate. As the pain passed through him, he breathed. He was missing a leg. Who would have thought it would be this much of a hassle? There was nothing to keep him planted onto the ground. And with one of his arms missing, he failed to balance himself. He waited for the pain to subside. When it did, he picked himself up again with the help of his spear. This time he tried leaning his back onto a tree, and swinging his spear. But with that he couldn't put any strength into his swings. What should he do? What should he? He kept trying and trying, but each time he did, he failed. Before he knew it, he was lying on the ground, looking up the sky. I'm missing an arm and a leg, of course, my strength would also leave me. Giga closed his eyes once more. I won't die, right? When I wake up again, I'll have to swing my spear again. BDNVL.M Lily had plenty of time nowadays because she didn't have to take care of the refugees. She used that time to patrol the village. If humans and goblins were to start quarreling, the days of fear and stress would return. She'd rather be spared from that. Although it's a tad different from relaxing, Lily wants to properly enjoy these days. Lord Lily, is there anything the matter? The one who called out to her was the goblin water magician, Gizo. A goblin with an appearance similar to that of a human. A figure that's long and slender, red skin, a vicious gaze, and sharp fangs protruding out of his mouth. If it weren't for those, he could easily be seen a human. With a robe over the goblin's body, he was like a scholar. As Lily thought those things, she answered the goblin. It's nothing, I'm just patrolling. We've also increased in number, so it would be troubling if any problems were to occur. Hearing that, Gizo laughed. From Lily's perspective that laugh was nothing more than derision, but in truth, that goblin was only just laughing. As expected, the walls between two differing races is big. Well, I'm grateful. After all, the village is currently weak. We also have some new larvae born to us a few days ago. With Lord Lily patrolling the village, we'll be able to focus on hunting. If one were to listen only to the goblin's words, the goblin would certainly seem gentle. So long as you don't look at his face. So Lily tried closing her eyes and folding her arms as she listened to the goblin speak. Right. I see things are also difficult on your side. Thank you for your efforts. Oh, no, not at all, compared to Lord Lily who mediates between humans and goblins, the effort we put in is nothing. Gizo smiled what he believed to be a sweet smile at Lily. Right, then I'll be on my way. As Lily was about to leave, Gizo called out to her. Ah. If you don't mind, I'd actually like to ask a favor. When Lily turned back her head, all she could see was a sinister smile. If it's something I can do, replied Lily. It's about Master Giga Rax, said Gizo weakly. Recently, he's been swinging his spear by a corner in the village noon and night. Seeing him like that is, Lily folded her hands as if to agree that Giga's actions were strange. Then Gizo began explaining with a perplexed expression on his face. Lily has a good of understanding of the basics of the goblin world, which is that it was a completely hierarchical society. What the higher-ups do shouldn't be wrong. And the lesser ones are to submit to that. That degree of freedom also sometimes appears in human society, but there is a large difference between the way goblins and humans think. Gizo seems to want to say that what Giga is doing is wrong. Please calm Master Giga Rax, said Gizo. I understand. I also have a greater responsibility regarding that matter than you all anyway, replied Lily. So you'll do it. From distress to happiness, Gizo's change in happiness caused Lily to wryly smile. He's rather easy to understand. I suppose it's because they never had to learn the ability to hide one's own emotions like humans do. Bluntly put, this world here is that of the savage lands. But lately, Lily started to think that a place like this where lies such as those are unnecessary might not be so bad. Please take care of Master Giga Rax. As Gizo bowed his head, Lily went off to go to where Giga was. Along the way, she happened by Giga, who was holding his head with his spear over his shoulders. He seemed to be suffering some sort of heartache, so Lily called out to him. Lord Giga, she said. Ah, human. Lordly. The small goblin rare, Giga, looked up to confirm that it was the tall Lily. You seem to be worrying about something. Is there anything I can do to help? Unlike the other goblin, this one was clearly different from humans. A wrinkled face, a bald head, this goblin has nothing in common with Giga except for the color of their skin. It's truly a mystery how they could come from the same race. What should I do? Asked Giga. He was so depressed he looked like he was about to squat. Seeing Giga so worried, Lily placed her hand over his shoulder, and gently spoke to him. It's something she couldn't have possibly thought of doing before, yet here she was crouching to meet the goblin rare size. Ah, said Giga, as expected. Lord Lee is a good human. As Giga sighed, he earnestly spoke out loud what was inside his heart. He continued. It's about Master Giga, he said. If it's about that, then Lord Gizo's already asked me about it, she replied. Really? Exclaimed Giga. Giga suddenly opening his eyes as he exclaimed that had quite the impact. Lily couldn't help herself but become panicked for a moment, but she quickly put herself back together. Right. He told me to stop Giga from practicing. That's wrong. What Master Giga wants is correct. Can't you help him, grow a leg instead? Asked Giga. Grow a leg? Asked Lily in surprise, unsure if she had heard wrong. Giga nodded. The spear is no good without legs, said Giga. Power comes from having both legs planted onto the ground. The same is true for the sword. There are some beginners who try to swing the sword with just their arms, but that's wrong. The most important thing in swordsmanship are the eyes. Next is footwork. Lily may not be that accomplished a swordsman, but she understands full well just how important the legs are. Stepping. Jumping. Standing. The power comes from the legs to the hips, and then to the arms. Lily knew that by experience, so she nodded to the goblin's words. Though goblins and humans may differ in race, the techniques they use to handle their weapons is the same. I know that, but, said Lily. Then. Lord Reshia, Lily could only shake her head at Giga's clinging gaze as she said that even Reshia can't grow arms or legs. Unfortunately, it's impossible even for Lady Recia, she said. I see. Thank you, Lord Lee. As Gi decided, he began to walk again, still greatly troubled. Thank you, huh? Damn it, just how simple am I? Although it wasn't like her, she felt her heart ache when the goblin thanked her, so she vented out her anger against the ground. Should I make him stop? Or should I make him continue? No, he should decide for himself instead. If Giga is to gather the respect of the goblins, then he'll have to make the decision for himself. As Lily bashfully though those things, she went to where Giga was. I want to consult Lady Recia. She shook her head to that thought. Pull yourself together. She yelled to herself. What are you doing relying on Lady Recia for everything? She grasped the long sword by her waist, and closed her eyes to calm herself. Calm down, calm down. Lily, the feeling of touching the cloth wrapped around the handle of her sword calmed her down. She never knew that taking a single step could be this scary. But even then, she took that step. If she were to run, then she wouldn't be able to face Lady Recia. She would also be betraying the goblin's trust. How should she describe what she was seeing? Falling all over the place, there was no other way to describe it, but clumsy. But he endured the pain. And no matter how many times he fell, he picked himself back up, and stood. He had within him a noble soul, one that wouldn't flinch in the face of challenge. That truth was shown to Lily clearly. The spear struck out by his long spear was certainly fast. It could undoubtedly kill its foes many times. But because he doesn't have a leg, each time he repeats the attack, he falls over. But he didn't give up. He struck out his spear, and each time, he would bring it back and try to strike it into the ground to keep himself standing. It seems he truly doesn't understand that he's lost his arm. His balance is also bad, making the situation even worse. Panting, his body was covered in wounds and dirt all over. But even then, he did not falter. Seeing that, the adventurer Lily couldn't help but feel strong emotions stir up from within her. First came bewilderment. Then gradually, that changed into confusion. As she became aware of the emotions within her, she calmly walked toward Giga. What are you planning? Asked Giga, out of breath, as he looked up to Lily. At the other end of his gaze was Lily, who had brandished her sword. I swear by the sword, and ask you. The words of restriction of a knight. When a knight swears to his sword, it means that any lie before him would be met with a swift decapitation. The polished, naked sword shone like sunlight. Why do you go that far? Is it for the king? Do you want to kill enemies that much? Giga stood up his body with his one arm, and Saturday as he glared at Lily. It's because of a promise. The king promised me to fight with him again. Lily grinded her molars. I want to kick that Goblin King right now. Do you want a leg? That would be best. But even without that, I will fight. He was serious. His actions from all this time proved that. She thought she would lose. The power she had on her hands that held her blade gradually weakened, and the tip of her blade touched the ground. I kicked your spear just now. What an insolent thing to do. Giga, I challenge you to a duel. I accept. In 3 days' time. Very well. As if she wanted to run from that place, Lily ran back to where Recia was. Author note. I'll be writing 3 chapters about the village. I wanted to portray the facial features of the goblins that don't stand out. Volume 1, Chapter 52.67. Gossips. The one who chose the sword. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Name. Lily Oria. Class. Human level. 56. Job. Adventurer. Possessed skills. Swordsmanship C+, the mind's eye, 3-stage / innate talent, oath of the night, counter, echo steps, divine protection, sword god, god of flames attribute. Fire abnormal status. Due to the scar of defeat. You have been afflicted with Altesia's curse. Innate ability and the mind's eye are sealed. Fighting spirit reduced by 40%. Please. With her head hung, Lily prostrated herself before Reshia. Ms. Lily. For someone such as Lily who is working as an adventurer, which is both dangerous and unsuitable for a woman, her pride is naturally extremely high. It was precisely because Reshia knew that she couldn't help but stare wide-eyed when she saw Lily's conduct. For what exactly? In any case, please tell me the details first. Lily finally raised her head up, and spoke. In the past, I aspired to become a knight. Because of that I've read many tales regarding knights. I just happened to remember one of those tales. Lily looked desperate as she grasped the dirt of the ground. Reshia quietly listened to her. The tale of the Iron Arm Knight, Ritzergult. He lost his right arm in battle, so he used a metal arm in place of his missing limb, and wandered the country. He garnered plenty of achievements throughout his travels, and in the end, he became a meritorious knight. Commander. The Ivory Tower knows how to make prosthetics, right? Please teach me that. The Ivory Tower is a treasure trove of knowledge. And it seems there are actually quite a number of high-class nobles and renowned warriors who were able to continue fighting with the use of prosthetics. Reshia can't say for sure whether this is true though, as she's only heard of it, and had never really seen one. And of course, neither has Lily. Her experience as an adventurer is shallow, and before she could find the spare time to gather knowledge of this world, she was taken captive. But it seems that she's heard of rumors of those sort of people. Moreover, even the possibility that such a thing is possible because of the knowledge of the Ivory Tower. The knowledge of the Ivory Tower is truly worthy of 1,000 gold. That was common sense even amongst the adventurers. What are you going to do after learning it? I will make them, and give them to Gi-ga. Is that the right thing for an adventurer to do? Or is that your decision as the person, Lily? Adventurers are those who stand against the monsters. Wielding their great strength, they mow down hordes of monsters throughout the world. They are the vanguards meant for that purpose. As Reshia questioned Lily, the aura she gave off was not one that belonged to the image of the young girl, Reshia, but that of the saint. I don't know, said Lily. But I have sworn to my sword, and challenged Lord Giga to a duel. The duel must be fair. Lily tightly held the grip of her sword, and she said. Seeing Lord Giga swing his spear without his leg or arm made me think I would lose. I can't go back to being an adventurer while remaining defeated. That is a wall. Unless I wipe away this defeat, I won't be able to move forward. I beg of you, Lady Reshia. I don't want to lose. There is a great difference between losing mentally and losing in skill. Lily had to challenge them. Giga, and her own self. I understand, nodded Reshia. But there's a condition. What is it? Please win, sweetly smiled Reshia. Yes, strongly nodded Lily. He tumbled onto the ground, and he looked up the night sky. He thought back on Lily who dropped by during the afternoon. She challenged him to a duel, but perhaps she was cheering him on. After all, although it was a bit strange, he couldn't feel the slightest tinge of ill will from her. Moreover, the gaze she sent back to him seemed to be just about to burst out into tears at any time. Normally, when humans mean ill, scorn could be seen in their eyes, but it was already nighttime. But although there was no time left until the promised day, Giga's body was cruelly heavy. With only one leg, he couldn't handle his spear no matter how hard he tried. He wondered why. It's the same spear I've always been using, so why am I having such a hard time after having only lost one leg? Before I became a rare class, and got the attention of the king, before the village was attacked by the orc leader, I was always fighting with a spear. It was an absurd feeling. As if something that had always been beside him had suddenly become so distant. Are you that unhappy just because I lost an arm and a leg? Those words were asked to the spear that was pierced into the ground, but no answer was returned. Of course. Spears can't talk. It can only bow to his will, and show his strength as he wishes. That's how it's supposed to be. I am unhappy. Giga jumped up at the unexpected response. What? I am greatly unsatisfied. He couldn't help but stare at the spear that was pierced into the ground. Who knew it would actually talk to him? Did the spear talk? What are you saying? Thinking it strange, he looked up. There, he saw Lily. When he saw her, his face visibly grimaced. But she intentionally ignored that. There should still be another day until our duel, said Giga. Right, nodded Lily as she struck out a wooden rod. What is this? Your new leg. Giga inclined his head as if asking, what are you talking about? Something like this couldn't be a leg. A leg is a bit more like. As he was thinking that, Lily knelt by his feet, and installed the wooden rod to where Giga's missing leg should have been. She reinforced it with a leather belt, adjusted the size to match the length of Giga's other leg, and then wrapped the leather belt around it. This'll hurt a bit. The strong gaze Lily shot as she looked up showed that it would really hurt, so Giga gritted his teeth. Jigu. With the sensation of something digging into his flesh coupled with the pain, it certainly felt like he had a new leg. Try standing, suggested Lily. As Lily helped Giga, he tried to stand himself up, and for the first time in a while, he was able to stand on his two legs. As Giga took a few steps, dazed, a voice of wonder leaked out of him. Oh, I can walk. It feels like it's digging into my flesh a bit, but this artificial leg can definitely support my body. Why? Why would you give this to me? Won't this be disadvantageous for you in our duel? After the third step, Giga stopped, and after much trouble, he turned around to face Lily. A duel should be fair, said Lily. Her straight gaze proved that there were no other reasons than that. I thank you, said Giga. It's too early for those words yet. Let me hear them after the duel. I see. As Giga deeply bowed, Lily turned her back on him, and briskly walked. As Giga watched her back disappear into the distance, he looked up the night sky. King, I can still fight. I want to meet the king soon. Facing each other were the spirit of one woman and one beast. The surrounding area was quiet. It was now the promised day. Giga and Lily faced off at the plaza of the village. The sound of the long sword being drawn from its sheath resounded as Lily drew her weapon. Opposite her, Giga stood firmly on his two legs over the ground. He let the tip of his spear fall as he held his weapon in a lowered stance. Giga's body sunk. The goblin who possessed an indomitable soul, called out. Come, yelled Giga. The knight sworn to victory replied. Bring it, she said back. And so, within the village where the king was not, the curtains over a duel was drawn. He took a step with his artificial leg. The tip of his spear rose up like the head of a snake. Then in an instant, his spear extended as if to bite at the throat of the foe before him. The blade of the spear may have been removed, but Giga's attack was still strong enough to kill if received directly, but Lily slipped through that attack. Her sword slipped through from below the already low spear. At the same time, she activated her, and she sped up. Within the school of Zweil that Lily uses, the first thing one must learn as proof of one's coming of age is this skill. This skill is the two legs within the principle, one eye, two legs, upon which her sword school was founded. The great speed brought about by her is a special skill unseen in other styles. Lily's accelerated sword aimed for Giga's body. The tip of the spear was flicked, and the sword came swinging from another angle. Fitting for the senses of a beast out in the wild, Giga immediately took back the spear he had struck out as he sensed danger coming. Then he jumped back, dodging the trajectory of the swinging sword, and he struck out the handle of his spear over the trajectory to protect his body. Lily's long sword crashed into his spear, sending a shock running through his body. But Lily's slender arms did not have enough strength behind them to break the tip of his spear. Giga took some distance, and paid careful attention where Lily would move. In a match between spear and sword, the deciding factor will be the distance. Giga still had some of that. This artificial leg is quite good, he said. Like second nature, Lily wielded her long sword over her shoulder as she fixed her stance. A handicap of having just one arm just isn't enough, fiercely laughed Giga. Lily smiled back in response. Let's go, she yelled. Come, challenged Giga. The one who attacked was Lily. She sped up with the use of her, and she swung down the sword over her shoulders with all her strength. Giga struck out his spear to meet Lily's sword, but the speed of her sword was faster than he expected, causing him to click his tongue. So you weren't serious a while ago. But it was too late. The moment Giga tried to bring back his spear, Lily tried to add another blow, proving her sword faster than Giga's spear. This time Giga jumped back completely unlike before. The descending blade then split into three, and rained over Giga. The three slashes hollowed the ground, causing clouds of dust to gather up, shrouding the two warriors. But when the veil of dust cleared up, only Lily could be seen. What is the meaning of this? Asked Giga. It's nothing. It's just that your king isn't the only one who can use skills. Humans also have their own. As she swept the cloud of dust at her feet with a sweep of her sword, she once again wielded it over her shoulder. Now, come and fully taste the might of the Zweil sword style. Volume 1, Chapter 52.99. Gossips. The conclusion of the sword and the spear. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Name Reshia Fel Zeal Race. Human level. 30 Job. Zenobia's follower, Saint Attributes. Light, Holy Lily's sword grazed Giga's body. It was only one attack, yet it left behind 3 scars. As an opening showed itself at the conclusion of that attack, Giga skillfully handled his spear, and struck it out. That attack was sent toward the center of her body. By all means, it should have it, but... Phew. As she lightly exhaled, she sped up, and she moved to Giga's right flank. As Giga struck out his spear, he filled his artificial leg with strength, and he turned the other way. Using his spear as a shield, he blocked Lily's attack. Tch, Goo. Who came out ahead from that exchange? Lily frowned as her blade was sent back at her. At the same time, she moved down her head to dodge the fierce attack that came at her. The ferocity of that attack that passed by over her head caused cold sweat to drizzle down her back, but ignoring that, she took a step forward. If she were to take a step back, and widen the distance, the one who would be at a disadvantage is her. The one in the lead is her, both in terms of skill and the number of moves made, but she just can't seem to land the finishing blow. Giga's defense at point blank was unusually hard and steady. That eccentric spear handling of his, and that speed of his at recovering his spear being faster than even her own sword itself. The opponent before her was undoubtedly strong. Not as a monster, but as a warrior. The wall, that is the scar of defeat which she had to erase, was certainly, at this very moment, right before her very eyes. Not only was Giga unfamiliar with his left hand, it was also his first time fighting with only one hand. Naturally, Lily, who could show all of her strength, would be able to lead him by the nose. But he still had to land a decisive blow. He understood this fact well. He had barely been able to make any moves in this fight. And although small, the wounds he had been incurring throughout this duel has been adding up. Lily had gone through all the trouble of giving him an artificial leg to allow him a fair duel. So he had to show a proper fight. It would be inexcusable to her for him to lose without being able to demonstrate all of his abilities. The joy of fighting that Giga held changed into a will to fight as he took a step. Aiming for the moment right after Lily swung down her sword, he swept with his spear. His eyes were gradually getting used to Lily's movements. But although the attack he had sent just now would normally penetrate the defenses of a normal adventurer, Lily had the skill, allowing her to create some distance, and fix her stance. But the moment she did that, Giga jumped back. As a result, the distance between them widened greatly. Lily seemed to have been planning to start her charge again, as she couldn't help but tilt her head when Giga took a step back. But the moment she did, Giga's spear passed by the side of her face. Unable to stifle her fright, she took some distance. But as she did, Giga pursued. He had only been thrusting with his spear, but it was without a doubt that the distance between them was currently increasing. The reason behind that was his long arm. "So that's your plan," muttered Lily as she stared wide-eyed at Giga's stance. Giga only had one hand, so he had no choice but to hold the spear by its handle to thrust and sweep. And because of Lily's great speed, she was able to lead Giga around in a melee. But Giga's stance right now had him holding only the end of his spear. He would twist half of his body with the spearhead lowered to the ground, allowing him to increase the distance between them. Moreover, coupling that with that long arm of his, the distance made became one that Lily couldn't compensate for with her. That stance was specially made just for thrusting. Lily couldn't fight back. For the moment she tries to jump in as the spear retreats, it would thrust back again. She couldn't jump in recklessly. That would be the same thing as giving up her defenses. Because Giga couldn't deal with Lily's speed until now, she's been using a stance suited for close combat. But then again, even with the distance now farther, so long as the distance is shortened, and the battle turns into a melee, then Lily could win. It wasn't a big deal. It was merely a question of whether the spear would hit her or if it would pass by her. As she resolved herself, a fierce smile appeared on her face. Simple's good, right? As she silently laughed, she wielded the sword over her shoulder, and she switched her stance to a Chudan. No. Kami. She brought her concentration to the limits, and she focused on the end of the spear. As she lightly exhaled, she could even feel the sensation of the dust over the back of her feet. So long as she could see the moment the spear moved, she would be able to slip through. It was for that reason that she switched to a Chudan stance. As her molars gritted, she used and moved out. But at the same time, Giga also took a step forward. She was shocked. Giga swept his spear with a different stance, and Lily somehow blocked it while in Chudan. But the strength of that attack was too great, and she was blown away. Her body tumbled. As her vision spun about, Lily finally understood what had just happened. Giga had loosened his grip over the end of his spear, and the moment Lily moved, he moved at the same time. The reason his spear was lowered over the ground all this time wasn't because the end was heavy, it was so he could change his stance more easily. He read through everything. Shock took Lily, and at the same time, a violent pain attacked her left arm. It's broken. Nausea accompanied by pain took her, and her vision began to turn white. "I'm going to lose." As she thought that, her watery eyes looked up. And there, at the corner of her vision was Giga, who was still wielding his spear, and Reshia who was anxiously watching over them. But she gritted her molars so hard it seemed they would break. She used the sword that did not break, and she stood up with only her right arm. As she did, her left arm languidly dangled about. It was now nothing more than dead weight. Yet despite that, "I will surpass you," she declared. Her voice was shaking, but she spoke those words naturally without any tinge of doubt. She should have been much calmer that time when she confronted that king. Remorse and chagrin filled her whenever she thought back to that time. She had fought goblins in the past, but she had never fought anyone as strong as that. She also believed back then that it would be fine so long as she followed her senior adventurer, Kefil. But in the end, Reshia, who she should have been protecting, was taken captive by the goblins. The peaceful days they have now is because of the events of that day. But these peaceful days are only here because it's that Goblin King who they're dealing with. If it had been someone else that was much more hostile like the orcs or the ogres, then there's no need to ponder on the question. It's obvious. Reshia would have been assaulted, and her young life would have been scattered. And the one who would have had led her to that result would be none other than Lily herself. She can't forgive herself. No. The dread and the regret she had that day when she faced against the king needs to be dealt with now. She needs to surpass it. So she wielded the sword with her only remaining arm. It was cruelly heavy. Giga seemed to be calm, but taking a closer look, beads of sweat could be seen forming at the top of his brows. So you're also hurting. In the words often spoken within those of the Zweil sword school. When you're hurting, your opponent is also hurting. It's idealistic, but those were the words spoken by her respected master. And even today, those words echo within her. As she recalled the figure of her master, a sound resembling that of a distant glass shattering echoed. With only her right hand, she swung the sword she wielded over her head. Seeing Lily lift her sword over her head with her right arm as her left dangled about languidly, Giga's eyes opened wide, shocked. Her will seemed just about to flicker just moments ago, and yet now. That same lack of will couldn't be seen at all within her gaze. Her left arm appears to have been broken by that last attack too. Good grief, that little girl's resolve really makes me want to admire her. They, the goblins, who were born for the sole purpose of fighting know it all too well. Resolve is everything. Without it everything will be taken. The king himself holds a distant ambition. It's for that they fight their war so that they may cut open a path to the fulfillment of their king's ambition. He was the same. He wished to fight with his king. For that is everything. But the girl before his eyes, Lily, was different. If she wished for it, she could live any other way. She could till the land, she could sew clothes. She had many other paths she could have chosen, and yet she chose to walk the path of war. That will is deserving of respect. So it's only fitting that he brings forth all of his might to crush that will. As he stepped in with his artificial leg, he swept with his spear. He held the middle of his spear's handle, and aimed for the center of the body of the foe before him. It was an attack difficult to dodge. Knew that attack should have cut down the will of the strong foe before him. But instead, Giga was left with his eyes wide opened, shocked. The sharp shock of his spearhead was beaten into the ground instead as Lily calmly stared at Giga. Then, I shall try everything. He bashed, he swept, he thrusted, he slashed. He attacked Lily with every kind of attack he could muster to bring down her defenses. But each and every time, his spear was struck down to the ground. Where was she getting that strength? Her left arm was dangling about powerlessly. Beads of sweat trickled down her brows. No matter how you put it, she was clearly exhausted. No. That's wrong. Didn't he acknowledge it just a while ago? This human is strong. It's not that he didn't have any ways of fighting, but that she had the strength to match his. And the way she was now was the strongest she's been yet. Although tired, she's strong. His fighting spirit, roused, it screamed at him to fight. Those emotions blazed like a flame within his eyes, yelling at him to defeat the foe before him. Gurua. As he bellowed out his fighting spirit, he let loose his greatest attack. Without the slightest bit of deviation in his aim, he attacked, but it was effortlessly deflected. This much was expected though. For this was the strongest foe he had battled yet. As he approached, he swept with his spear, and this too was easily deflected. The tip of her blade slowly reached for the sky, and in an instant, she assumed her stance once more. And at that moment, he understood it. This was the finale. The long-awaited climax of the duel. With the spearhead of his spear still lowered into the ground, he took a step forward to meet the descending handle of the sword that I will receive it. With the distance shortened, the one who would triumph in strength was he. As Giga took that step, he felt a sensation much like that of a lump of ice slipping off his back. He felt it the moment his eyes met with Lily's. It was only for a moment, but he certainly believed his weapon would be cut. The weapon Giga was using was an iron spear. The edge, the handle, everything was made out of iron. Thinking about it logically, there was no way it could possibly be cut. But Lily's empty eyes caused alarms of the highest alert to ring out within Giga's mind. Will I make it? He asked himself. He put all his strength into his two legs, and he dodged out of the way. Blood trickled down the place where his artificial leg was connected, but he didn't have the time to bother with that. The iron spear that he should have had been holding right in front of him was suddenly cut down in two. Moreover, because he was too slow in dodging out of the way, even his prosthetic leg was cut. Uoe! Lily bellowed out her fighting spirit. As soon as Giga thought that the situation had turned for the worst, he took his spear in his mouth, and he went down on all fours to the ground. It was a stance much like that of a beast. Although he had gone down to a crawl, Lily didn't show any signs of stopping, so he sped up his pace. His artificial leg had also gotten shorter, so this stance was the easiest. He moved at a speed that surprised even he himself as he aimed for Lily's flank. He moved as if it was the stance he was using all along. This is it. Crawling on the ground, from that position that was as if he was crouching, he used his body like a spring, and he quickly jumped forward. At the same time, he used his arms, raised up his upper body, and attacked Lily. Lily opened her eyes wide in surprise as Giga shot past her flank with the speed of a bullet. At the same time, he took the spear he had in his mouth, and he struck it at Lily's wide-open side. When she opened her eyes, what greeted her was the blue sky and Reshia's smiling face. "Ah, I lost," wryly smiled Lily as her face convulsed in pain. "My apologies, Lady Reshia." "What for?" asked Reshia. "I couldn't fulfill your conditions. If you're going to fight, then win." That was the condition that Reshia set, but she couldn't fulfill it. "In the past, I also happened to read of a tale regarding a knight," said Reshia as she rubbed her hands on Lily's broken left arm, healing her. "That knight overcame defeat, and became a knight with a noble heart. It's my dream to be protected by such a knight." Reshia's healing hands covered Lily's eyes. "Ms. Lily, you're a brilliant knight, you know." The overflowing tears soaked Reshia's warm hands. "Lily Aurea because, abnormal status, Altesia's curse has been lifted, and can now be used. Level has risen. 56. 60, skill, growth speed is faster. Skill, you can predict the movements of opponents a class lower than yours. Skill, when your swordsmanship level is equal to or higher than your opponent, you can cut the iron weapon of your opponent. Giga racks due to the missing leg being compensated for by the prosthetic. Fighting power now only down by 30%. Skill, acquired. Spear can be handled as proficiently with one hand as one can with two hands. Skill, when fighting against someone of equal or lesser class, it is possible to see through their weakness. Level has risen. 87. 89 Author's note. And so the winner is Giga. But in terms of growth, Lily got the better end of the deal. I thought I'd show the status of other characters other than the protagonist, so this time, I showed Reshia's. I'll show the descriptions for the skills when there's an opportunity. I want to. Volume 1, Chapter 53. Treasure. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Race. Goblin class. Lord, Horde Chief possessed skills. Ruler of the Horde, Insurgent Will, Overpowering Howl, Swordsmanship B+, Insatiable Desire, King's Soul, Ruler's Wisdom I, Eyes of the Blue Snake, dance at death's border, red snake's eye, magic manipulation, soul of a crazed warrior, third impact, the third chant, instinct, ruler's wisdom 2, divine protection. Goddess of the underworld Altesia attributes darkness, death subordinate beasts high kobold Hesu, LV1, Gastra, LV20, Cynthia, LV20, Orc King Bui, LV36. After driving away the Gaidga goblins from the village of Ganra, we went to the center of the village, and I asked them to show me that so-called treasure. Narsa was against it at first, but Gilmy convinced her, and she handed me the bow on her back. This is the treasure that was bestowed to Ganra, the meteor bow by Unii bow, said Gilmy. It doesn't really seem that valuable from the outside, but there should be something special to it. I still can't see it as anything else except for a normal bow though. This bow can alight a fire on the arrowhead of an arrow, he continued. So it can create fire where there's nothing. What's so amazing about that? Chieftain, could you please demonstrate the bow's power? Petitioned Gilmy to Narsa. To which she then wordlessly took the bow, and knocked an arrow. The arrow loaded, the bowstring creaked. Then with the release, the wind echoed and the sound of something being ripped resounded, and the arrow was in mid-flight, drawing a parabola in the air. With its tip clad in flames, it was indeed reminiscent of a falling star or a meteor. Shoot your bows at that arrow, ordered Gilmy. When I heard that, it hit me. So that's what it is, I thought. This arrow is a marker. Several people responded to Gilmy's call, and they shot an arrow at that bright mark. Do you understand now the value of this bow? He asked me. In other words, what you mean to say is that the only ones who can properly use this treasure are the Ganra goblins who are able to use bows, right? Which then goes to mean that there's no value in taking it save for satisfying one's greed for collecting strange artifacts. What a clever goblin. Yes. I understand it very well, I replied. That and the value of the Ganra tribe that controls it. Gilmy heaved a sigh of relief at my response, but Narsa could only look at us with a puzzled gaze. I suppose it's a bit too hard for normal goblins to understand, but to make the long story short, Gilmy just ensured the safety of all of Ganra. If one can show their worth, then one won't be persecuted. It's because of that line of thinking that Gilmy did what he did. It's a good decision. After all, I am gathering the strength of goblins to rule as king. To these goblins who live in a society dictated by power, being able to stand at the top of that society is what decides heaven or hell. R.A. Gilmy is undoubtedly a tough goblin. Let's change the subject, I said. I want to hear about the other tribes. With the food supply of the tribe, a banquet was held at the village of Ganra. It was during that banquet that I inquired of the other tribes. It's imperative that I know who the enemies are and who might be willing to become allies. The chief of Gordab, Kuzan, will most likely remain neutral, said Gilmy. He doesn't have much interest in worldly matters, you see. Lord Alihalia of the Parajua tribe on the other hand, might be hostile. He's a proud man, after all. Seating at the chief seats, surrounded by flames, were me and Narsa. Then surrounding us were the higher-ranked goblins amongst the Ganra tribe and the rare and nobles class goblins that I had brought with me. The arrow Narsa shot before proved to be quite the entertainment. Everyone was stiff at first, but after eating some meat, everyone grew lively. Meanwhile, Gilmy's words made me think. The Gordab tribe is a tribe that handles various magical beasts. The Parajua tribe is a tribe of riders. And the Gaidga tribe is a tribe of goblins with Herculean strength. Considering the few men I have with me, fighting head-on might not be the best of ideas. What's the power relationship between the tribes? I asked. Gilmy glanced at Narsa's direction for a moment before immediately opening his mouth. There wasn't such a thing in the past, but in present times, the Gaidga tribe is suppressing the other tribes. The Parajua tribe might go under the Gaidga tribe if they see just how strong they are, said Gilmy. Didn't you just mention that the Parajua tribe is prideful? I asked. That's precisely why, he immediately said back. My apologies if this might come off as rude, but they'd probably rather join with someone they know rather than kneel to an outsider. Makes sense. Is the Parajua tribe's village nearby? I asked, my mouth twisting into a smile. Their village is about 2 days to the west from here, answered Gilmy. They live by the foot of a mountain range. I see. How many people from Ganra can I take with me? Gilmy's downcast glance carefully scrutinized me. 15 goblins, he answered. But only from the troops of our RA family. It's a rare opportunity, so I might as well get the troublesome stuff out of the way. I see. Speaking of which, Gilmy, from now on will you, unfortunately, I was just about to ask him to gather Ganra, but then he stopped me, a gleam of desperation visible in his eyes. And then he spoke. Only those that carry the blood of Master Jylan may rule the village of Ganra, he said. Is that so? Well, there's no point in pushing the matter here. He is a stubborn goblin after all. About as stubborn as Gi Za. Although it does make me wonder. Why Narsa? Why is he loyal to her? Wasn't there anyone more suitable to swear fealty to? At the very least, if it were up to me, I would have given him a higher position. I'm going to sleep, said Narsa as she stood up displeased. As I watched her walk away with Gilmy, I wondered to myself why Gilmy chose to follow her. You look like you didn't want to see them off, said an astonished voice. As I looked up back in front of me, what greeted me was Gi Za, standing with a slab of meat in his hands. I was just wondering what sort of thing this so-called relationship between master and servant is. What? Are you jealous, King? He sarcastically remarked, causing my eyes to open wide in surprise. Seeing that, Gi Za couldn't help himself but laugh. It's not like there's any need for all goblins to swear fealty to the king, right? Even if their loyalty lies elsewhere, as long as they give their power to you, isn't that enough, he said. I was thinking of having all the goblins swear fealty to me though, I said back. Seriously, he asked as he sent a gaze at me that was more resigned than astonished. Yes, I curtly replied. Then it won't be enough. No matter how many bodies you have, it won't be enough. Of course, even your life. Really? Come to think of it, I do recall pushing myself a bit. Just do as you wish, King. If anyone stands in our way, then we'll consider that person our enemy. So it doesn't matter whether it's a goblin or an orc, huh? Oh, come to think of it, have you sworn fealty to me? I know it sounds stupid, but if I don't take this opportunity and ask now, then I might never get a second chance. The words I spoke when I lost weren't a lie. Having finished the meat in his hands, Gi Za stood up. I'll be going now, he said. I need to change the guards keeping watch after all. He called out to the Ganra and my goblins, and ordered them to their post. Don't cause them trouble, I told him. He has to order them because I can't order the goblins to go to their post myself. If I order them myself, they won't be able to relax. Remember King, just do as you want, shrugged Gi Za as he vanished into the darkness. No words left my lips, but I thanked him nonetheless. Volume 1, Chapter 54. Writers of Parajua, you are listening at novelfull.audio. Race. Goblin class. Lord, Horde Chief possessed skills. Ruler of the Horde, Insurgent will, Overpowering Howl, Swordsmanship B+, Insatiable Desire, King's Soul, Ruler's Wisdom I, Eyes of the Blue Snake, Dance at Death's Border, Red Snake's Eye, Magic Manipulation, Soul of a Crazed Warrior, Third Impact, the Third Chant, Instinct, Ruler's Wisdom II, Divine Protection. Goddess of the Underworld Altesia Attributes. Darkness, Death Subordinate Beasts. High Cobalt Hesu, LV1, Gastra, LV20, Cynthia, LV20, Orc King Bui, LV36, In the Black of the Night, just as I was about to retire, a goblin from Ganra came rushing to me. King, the enemy has come, he said, visibly panicked. Take a seat first, I replied. But the goblin tried to complain, but the pressure I gave left him unable to endure, so he sat in front of me. Once his breathing settled down, I asked him. How many are there? Where are they coming from? I believe I left Giza in charge. Yes. The enemy are coming from the west. We don't know how many there are, but they're the riders of Parajua. The west, huh? Did they come to attack us? No. They've gathered at the boundary of the village, and are merely watching us. I see. The goblin tried to argue again, but I stopped him. I should go then. Although it's possible that they're in cahoots with the Gaidga and are merely waiting for their arrival from another direction, it might also be possible to negotiate with these Parajua goblins. I'd rather avoid sending my subordinates carelessly, and creating unnecessary enemies. The Ganra seem to be expecting the Gaidga to attack in the near future, so they've been rather restless. Fighting's forbidden until I go. But if they attack, then feel free to fight back. Understood. Yes, as my tail struck itself against the ground, I stood up, and left. My tail seems to be in a good mood. Now, just what sort are these riders of Parajua? In the black of the night, I walked, unfazed by the darkness. Unlike humans. Goblins have eyes that work well even in the dark. The dark doesn't bother us. Ho, the Ganra have built a wall around their village using the fences and the tress that naturally grow nearby. The village itself is situated higher than the surrounding area, so it is possible to look down at the enemy from above. The natural walls that were built by the Ganra were vines wrapped around the budding sprouts of the toppled trees. It was above such walls that I stood and oversaw the enemy below. Truly, the sight that greeted me was nothing short of spectacular. So those are the riders of Parajua, I muttered to myself. Riding on the back of magical beasts were goblins holding the beasts' bridles in their hands. The beasts they rode on were like tigers with long fur, whose length was such that it was a size bigger than the beasts themselves, covering even their mouths and their feet. And a gleam in their eyes that was reminiscent of cats shone. And being 3 times the size of the goblins, those beasts of yellow and black stripes could easily tower over their masters. They were lined up around the village, surrounding it as they exuded a fearsome aura. It was a sight that would undoubtedly leave the faint-hearted in a daze. But what burned within my heart was instead that of joy. These riders are mine. That burning desire was just like that of an adventurer who's spotted a treasure. These so-called riders were simply that irresistible. Is it true? Has Parajua's riders come to attack us? The noisy one who said that was none other than Narsa, who climbed up the walls to a spot near me. Not yet, I calmly replied. Why are you taking this so leisurely? She complained. If you don't attack them from a distance now, we'll get trampled underfoot. Their beasts. They're different from the Gaidga, their legs are fast. Anxiety could be seen on the faces of the people of Ganra as they listened to the exchange between Narsa and I. It can't be helped, after all, they were attacked and had their village taken from them just a few days ago. I'm waiting for Gig's return, I said. As Gig could use the stealth skill, I sent him ahead to scout the area. There's no reason to go ahead and attack now. Even as a prank, there's nothing funny about attacking the enemy and exposing Gig to danger. Narsa bitterly hung her head. If it does turn into a battle, I'll have to borrow Ganra's forces. Just wait until then. Understood. As Narsa unwillingly backed down, I internally heaved a sigh of relief. What a pain, I thought. So this is what's it like to deal with a subordinate who isn't fully devoted to me. Should I deal with her with a more imposing aura like that of one leading a tribe? Regardless, I need to think of a way to better things. Sooner or later, the goblins will multiply. So it would be best if I can have goblins who can see what is beneficial and what is not, and follow me even without being fully devoted. But we still haven't reached that point. We are still at the preliminary stage, so for now, everything must be decided with a hierarchical system that goes from the top to the bottom. The opinions of weaker goblins, of others, aside from me is not yet needed. As expected, Gilmy should be the one to lead Ganra. But then the problem is how. King, I have returned. Gig's voice woke me up from my pondering, and I sent my gaze to him. How is it? I asked. There are about 30 Gaidga goblins to the south, he replied. I see. Goblins have good eyes even in the night. So their plan must be to have the Parajua attract our attention, and then, during that time, have the Gaidga attack the village. A rider from Parajua, yelled a Ganra goblin. Looking toward the direction of that voice, a lone rider could be seen approaching, requesting for negotiations. That's Lord Alyahalia. The words of the Princess of Ganra, Narsa, made my mouth twist. An unscrupulous man, huh? If you want to pull one over me, then I'll respond in kind. Good. Narsa, why don't we pay them back in kind? Are they planning to take us by surprise? Exactly. And in order to use that against them, call Gi-za. Gi-za had already finished deciding the formation of his subordinates when he arrived with them. At the middle was also Ganra's Gilmy, so I suppose it's only expected that they were able to finish the preparations well and fast. Looks like you know what to do. Gi-za nodded as if to say it was a given. The target is Gaidga. Do that, and Parajua should feel threatened. A mischievous smile appeared on Gi-za's face. And I smiled a smile just as mischievous back at him. As a crowd gathered, I gave my orders to my subordinates. Gi-go Amatsuki, Gi-gu Verbena, it's unfortunate, but you two will have to accompany me. It wouldn't be appropriate if it was just me after all. Understood. As you command. The curved sword-wielding goblin who had received the divine protection of the sword god nodded with dignity along with the goblin who is the former leader of the village. People of Garna, protect the village. There's no need for you to attack, but don't do anything that might allow the enemy to know that we don't have much men. The goblins turned pale as they nodded. As I nodded back, I looked to Gi-za. Gig, lead the way. The rest of you, follow Gi-za's commands. At Ganra's village, by the forest of the Twisted Giant, were the curtains on the second battle lifted. Accompanied by the noble classes, Gi-gu and Gi-go, as well as Narsa, I went to meet with Parajua. The place where the negotiations were to take place was the point halfway between the village and the army of Parajua. It was the best place considering Ganra's bows and the mobility of Parajua's riders. Also, although we were negotiating, we were still armed. I had my great steel sword iron second on my shoulder, Gi-go had his two curved swords sheathed by his waist, Gi-gu had his long sword on his back, his axe on his waist, and Narsa also brought her meteor bow by Unii bow with her. Meeting us was the representative of Parajua who was riding on his giant magical beast. That giant magical beast was like a tiger with stripes of yellow and black being the more dominant of the two colors. Its two eyes shone brilliantly as the light of the moon reflected on it. As its claws firmly stepped on the land, it exuded the aura befitting that of the king of the forest. And though its whiskers hid some, its great fangs could be seen peeking out. Riding that was a blue goblin. It was a noble class. The goblins of the tribes might be somewhat different from us normal goblins, but the color of their skin is the same. Wrinkles could be seen drawn on the goblin's face, it was not a youthful face, but the face of one who has lived many moons and years. And even the fur that extended from his head to his back has already turned white. The goblin was old. He held the bridle on one of his hands, while the other was placed on the sword by his waist. With his mouth drawn like a straight line, he gave off the impression of one who was hard to please. He looked straight at me with a gaze so potent it seemed to make a sound. "So young," muttered the noble class before me. His voice was deep. It was the sort that reverberated all the way one's body. "It's been a long time, Lord Alyahalia," greeted Narsa. I left the position of the representative to Narsa, so I only quietly watched them converse. "King," whispered Gi Gu, who was standing by my side. There were 3 escorts near the goblin called Alyahalia. Every single one of them was riding on a magical beast. Retreat was not an option, so there was only one option left to us. "If it comes to that, suppress the escorts," I said. Gi Gu quietly nodded as he backed down, and informed Gi Go of my orders. "What brings you here, Lord Alyahalia?" Alyahalia snorted uninterestedly at Narsa's words, and his gaze grew sharper. "Let's stop with the needless act," he said. It was apparent that he was not amused as he scowled strongly at Narsa. "Surrender," he demanded. "Do so, and I'll spare your life." "Has Parajua surrendered to Gaidga?" asked Narsa. Narsa's supplicant gaze was met with Alyahalia's scorn that was much like a laugh as he stared at her grimly. "Humph, someone who asked for help from an outsider to intervene in the tribe's matter has no right to criticize me." "So he did surrender. What happened to protecting Parajua's pride that you inherited from your ancestors?" questioned Narsa. Alyahalia laughed. "Something like that, is better off thrown to the dogs," he snapped as the pressure he gave off increased. As Narsa was taken aback, speechless, I steeled my nerves to prepare for battle. This goblin wants to fight. Well, at least his intentions are clear. The only problem is whether I abandon Narsa here or not. Narsa is the reason why Ganra is unable to meet my demands. As an army, it isn't good to have more than one will. But does that mean I should throw her away? If I were to ask myself whether such an action is right or not, then, the answer is clear. I am the king. He who has lost his pride is no longer a king, but a mere monster with power. So I will save her. I should do at least that much. Alyahalia must have seen the smile on my face as he sent his sharp gaze my way. "Young one, if you have something to say, then say it. Someone who has lost his pride is not a king." His teeth gritted. There was some distance between us, but the sound of his teeth grinding against itself clearly reached my ears. "Brat!" yelled Alyahalia. As bloodlust emanated from him, the 3 guards behind him grabbed their weapons. Meanwhile, Narsa couldn't utter out a single sound as the bloodlust was too great for her to bear. Gi Gu and Gi Go stepped in front of me. I wielded my great sword. My little finger, my ring finger, my middle finger, as I ascertained that my power gradually filled my grip on my blade, I measured the distance between me and the enemy. The tension was like an ice upon a pond as we each measured the distance between us. Affected by my bloodlust, the beasts began to growl. Then suddenly, from far away, shouts began to echo. Alyahalia couldn't help but wordlessly turn toward the direction of those shouts for a moment. "Unfortunately for you, your plan has already been seen through," I told him. "What?" asked Alyahalia as he glared at me with a look that could make even a demon run away barefooted. "You were planning to call us to negotiate while Gaidga took the village, correct?" Alyahalia turned his gaze away for a moment to think. The voices from far away started to near us. "We're returning," said Alyahalia. "Negotiations has broken down." As he pulled on the bridles, he turned, and left with his escorts. As I watched his back vanish into the distance, I asked Gi Go. "What do you think, Gi Go?" I wanted to hear Gi Go's honest thoughts, so I asked him. "If you order me to cut, then I will, but what?" "He's quite strong," smiled Gi Go Amatsuki ferociously. "How about you, Gi Gu?" I asked. "With those 3 escorts together, he's definitely a troubling opponent. He should be a bigger problem than Gaidga, no. My thoughts are mostly the same." The old goblin of Parajua, Alyahalia. He's old, but he's definitely not weak. Interesting, I muttered. How interesting, if I could add them to my army, then my kingdom will certainly grow. We're returning. Narsa, you as well. As I called out to Narsa, who was still in a stupor, we returned to Ganra's village. Volume 1, Chapter 55. Reliable. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Race. Goblin class. Lord, Horde Chief. Possessed skills. Ruler of the Horde, Insurgent will, Overpowering Howl, Swordsmanship B+, Insatiable Desire, King's Soul, Ruler's Wisdom I, Eyes of the Blue Snake, Dance at Death's Border, Red Snake's Eye, Magic Manipulation, Soul of a Crazed Warrior, Third Impact, the Third Chant, Instinct, Ruler's Wisdom II, Divine Protection. Goddess of the Underworld. Altesia attributes. Darkness, Death. Subordinate beasts. High Kobold Hesu, LV1, Gastra, LV20, Cynthia, LV20, Orc King Bui, LV36. The Gadga goblins were lurking in the dark, eagerly waiting for the order to attack. Their eagerness was understandable. After all, at one point, they thought they had already won, and had captured Ganra's village, but then they were kicked out. Then when they finally managed to make their escape, what was waiting for them was the angry face of their superior, Reweka. We're hitting them back, damn it. We're hitting them back. With a face like Reweka's, even an orc's face would appear cute in comparison. The Gadga goblins couldn't help but shrink before such a hideous face. Reweka's indiscriminate rampaging has never been questioned even now after all. We need to pick the right time, he grinned. Her face could be best described as that of a mischievous devil scheming something wicked. The Gadga goblins could only nod to that fiendish face of his. The beast-riding ones should be advising them to surrender any moment now. It was currently nighttime. The Gadga goblins were huddled together as they kept a lookout for Ganra's village that was no different from a natural fortress. They won't even know what hit them, laughed Reweka in a deep voice. The Gadga goblins nodded deeply without uttering a word. They were eager for the village to fall. Once the village falls, the first thing that'll follow is a feast. Of course, the remaining goblins on the opposing side will also be scattered, so they'll have to go after them, but they can do that after the feast. The beast-riders have sent their messenger, said a goblin scout. Rebecca deeply nodded when he heard the scout's report. We'll attack once they've gotten out of the village a bit, he said. Goblin eyes work well in the dark. And it was because of those very eyes that they saw it. The moment Reweka raised his arm, a chant echoed. My heart rides on the wind, Windia, it said. Then suddenly, the air shook. And 4 tornadoes appeared, attacking Reweka's burly arm. What? Cried Reweka out as a goblin muttered, it's been a while since we've had a feast, yet you actually attack at such a time. Where are your manners? As those words echoed, and Reweka's limbs were blown away by the 4 tornadoes, a small goblin ran through the Gadga goblins. Then sprinting like a gust of wind, what appeared next before the horde of Gadga were the small goblins who took back Ganra's village. Follow Lord Giza, ordered the Y.IGIG. At his call, the horde of goblins that had already grouped themselves into 3-man cells attacked the Gadga horde. Take their heads. Take their legs. Understood. The beast warrior Gigi called out to the stealthy Gig. Gigi rode on his 2-headed ostrich double head, wielding an axe on his back as he struck the Gadga goblins that were over twice his height. At the same time, the stealthy Gig concealed himself as he made the Gadga goblins scream in agony. Then dealing with the fallen Gadga goblins was the wind magician, Gi-Du, who would deal with them with his magic. And lastly, coming in to clean up were the normal goblins. They would go in when everyone was weakened, and would gouge out the already open wounds of the Gadga goblins, destroying them through their vital points. Arrows. Go for their heads, the wind carried Giza's voice, and the Ganra goblins who were accompanying them let loose a volley of arrows at the Gadga goblins' heads. Second volley. At R.A. Gilmy's voice, another volley of arrows was let loose, causing what appeared to be a rain of arrows descend on the Gadga goblins. Although the Gadga goblins' muscles were tough, and couldn't be penetrated by the arrows normally, their vital points were still fair game. After all, no matter how much one endeavors, places such as the eyes or the inside of the mouth couldn't be trained. So the Ganra goblins focused their arrows on those vital points. The Gadga goblins tried to stop them, but the Wide.igig charged ahead, and struck at their feet. Then with the normal goblins in tow, they would pile up countless small wounds on top of small wounds, eventually dealing enough damage to take the goblins down. The situation did not look at all favorable for the Gadga goblins. And to make matters worse, the leader who should have had been leading the Gadga goblins had already been retired by the first attack. The flow of battle could no longer be changed. Don't come near me. While he was watching over the normal goblins, Gi Zu's skill activated. The spear-wielding Gi Zu who had received the divine protection of the Mad God activated his skill. Guruagua. The Gadga goblin's fist swung at him, expecting a slaughter. But to his surprise, Gi Zu stopped it. Then with a push, he sent the Gadga goblin flying back. Impossible, said the Gadga goblin out loud, unbelieving. But while he was caught in a stupor, Gi Zu approached him, and struck him with his spear. The spear penetrated his shoulder and into his bones, leaving the Gadga goblin unfit for battle. Run, said a Gadga goblin. A group that is managed only through fear of the commander will easily topple over once that commander is gone. And as soon as one of them starts running, the rest will come following. Like that, this squad of Gadga goblins fell apart, and they ran for their lives. There's no need to pursue, ordered Gi Za as he stopped the goblins from pursuing. We've done enough. Go check on the injured instead. After they drove off the Gadga goblins, Gi Za gathered the Gadga goblins that couldn't run away and was still breathing in one place. 5 are lightly injured. That's not too bad. As he nodded, satisfied, he spoke to the Gadga goblins. Listen well. From now on, you will all be answering to my questions. If not, he signaled to Gig with his eyes, and Gig struck one of the Gadga goblins in the foot with the long sword in his hands. The Gadga goblin screamed, and the others couldn't help but have their faces cramp at the sight of a friend's agony. Are there any other hordes who will be attacking the village? Overcome by fear, the Gadga goblins shook as they shook their heads. Are you colluding with the Parajua goblins? Asked R.A. Gilmy. The Gadga goblins were lost for a moment, but soon after, they shook their head. However, Gi Za was not all too pleased by Gilmy's behavior. I'd prefer it if you didn't ask unnecessary questions, said Gi Za coldly. No, it was necessary, retorted R.A. Gilmy. Gi Za clicked his tongue. But he didn't pursue the matter any further. As for why, that's because Gilmy tried to ask another question. The one to decide whether the question is necessary or not is us, said Gi Za, annoyed as Gilmy replied with a but, in an attempt to argue. As the two glared at each other, suddenly, Gi's two-headed ostrich doublehead appeared right in between them. Fighting's not allowed, right? He said. Right. Fighting's no good. The king gets along even with humans, added the stealthy Gig. The beast warrior, Gigi, and the stealthy Gig had come to intervene. It was well known that these two got along well. We're not fighting, we're just having a difference in opinion. And now that I think about it, it was indeed wrong of me to interrogate alone. Having been indirectly told to follow the king's example, Gi Za was at a loss for words. At the same time, he also understood that there was no reason for him to cause strife with his friends here. And since he was told that by his senior, in terms of how long they've been serving the king, he couldn't say anything back. No, I also said too much. The one in charge is Lord Giza. Gilmy bowed his head. Even if it was Gilmy, he was still a newcomer. So him butting in was certainly disrespectful to Giza. Moreover, he was well aware that he wasn't being himself. It was because he saw Alihauya of Parajua. The moment he saw him, his heart raced, causing him to lose his composure. For the meantime, let's take them to the king, suggested Giza. To which Gilmy and Gi nodded in agreement. That'll be best, right, they respectively said. With everyone in agreement, Giza took the prisoners with them. Giza appointed Gilmy to lead the way back. As they went their way, Giza took a good long look at the traces of war behind them. It wasn't an easy victory though, he muttered. The battle by the forest of the twisted giant unknown forest between us and the Gaidga is already ours. The Parajua riders arriving is certainly painful, but their arrival doesn't mean that we've lost. And more than anything else. You sure took your time, I said as I eyed the return of the group of goblins that had gone out. The Ganra goblins who were with them had expressions of excitement on their faces as they took the prisoners with them. This victory should lessen their fear of the Gaidga. How strict? Did the negotiations fail? Asked Giza mischievously as the corners of his mouth twisted. Apparently, they just came here to declare war, I said. If there was such a thing as an evil smile, then that smile that was currently plastered on our faces would be just that. Meanwhile, while I was conversing with Giza, Gilmy and the others who had brought the prisoners were treated like heroes by the Ganra as the crowd showered them with cheers. As I conversed with Giza, we were both relieved to know that each other was doing well. Volume 1, Chapter 56. Gilmy's Pride. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Race. Goblin class. Lord, Horde Chief. Possessed skills. Ruler of the Horde, Insurgent will, Overpowering Howl, Swordsmanship B+, Insatiable Desire, King's Soul, Ruler's Wisdom I, Eyes of the Blue Snake, Dance at Death's Border, Red Snake's Eye, Magic Manipulation, Soul of a Crazed Warrior, Third Impact, the Third Chant, Instinct, Ruler's Wisdom II, Divine Protection. Goddess of the Underworld. Altesia attributes. Darkness, Death. Subordinate beasts. High Kobold Hesu, LV1, Gastra, LV20, Cynthia, LV20, Orc King Bui, LV36, Attack. There shouldn't even be any other choice. The higher-ups of Ganra all looked at each other when they heard my words. After the success of our operation, we decided to discuss our next course of action. Right now, we're discussing by the village so everyone can hear. It was Narsa's suggestion. She said that it's better this way since it'll make it easier to inform everyone, but as for what she's really thinking, I don't know. There are two main points in this meeting. 1, what to do with all the prisoners. And 2, what to do next. If it was back at the former village, then it would have been just a question of how to make my plan succeed, but in this case, we're discussing the plan itself. But then what should we do about the prisoners? Ganra can't feed that many. Negotiate. The representative will be Narsa. As for whether she's really eager to do that or whether she's just saying it to let the meeting proceed smoothly as a form of rebellion against me, I don't know. What's certain is that Narsa has the support of the old goblins, while I have Gilmy's and the younger goblins' support. Then should we kill the prisoners? Said Giza nonchalantly with a mischievous smile. Looks like he wants to break apart the current attitude toward the 4 tribes. He wants to stand out with violence, so as to make my opinions pass easier. He's working hard as always. Ridiculous, curtly refused Narsa. Giza glared at her coldly, but Narsa repelled it easily. Then let me ask you, how do you plan on dealing with those prisoners? Asked Giza. We'll negotiate. It can be Parajua or Gaidga, whichever's fine. We'll talk to them, and negotiate for peace. Humph. As soon as Giza heard the word peace, he snorted. Peace. Have you forgotten what happened just a few days ago? They attacked your village without any warning. If it weren't for us, you would have all long been driven away. Have you already forgotten the many sons of Ganra who sacrificed themselves? Voices of agreement resounded from the younger ones. Tears could even be seen at the corner of their eyes. Of course, I haven't. But at this rate, more and more will suffer. Narsa's words aren't thoughtless either. My final goal is to conquer the fortress of the abyss, and build a kingdom of goblins. So of course, less casualty is better. After all, if I am to create a strong kingdom, then I'm going to need every useful goblin I can get. While I quietly thought to myself, the meeting continued. However, the two sides were at a standstill, and time only trickled by with nothing getting done. Elders, warriors of Ganra, please lend me your ears. Gilmy spoke. With his head bowed, he looked like a criminal burdened with some great sin. It was as if he was a failure of some sort, and was so discouraged that he wouldn't even feel any sense of inferiority even if he were to be told to humble himself. If the chief of the East were to step down now, would we still be able to stand against the Gaidga? The faces of Ganra's elderly all began to cramp at his words. Right now, we are weak. We cannot protect this village alone. Those honest words blew the flames away, leaving the once rowdy meeting quiet. I was picked up by the late Master Jylan. I owe this village something I can never pay. And that's why, I can't stand the thought of this village withering away. His words gradually became fiercer. And they became so fierce to the point where it seemed as if one could see flames, burning, within R.A. Gilmy's chest. Gilmy, muttered Narsa. She closed her eyes tight as if enduring some sort of great pain. For a moment, only a moment, Gilmy looked at her. He continued. Even Lord Jylan, the great Gaidiata, the first archer, even he could not win against Gaidga. The first archer Gaidiata. Is that an honorary title of some sort? At this rate, we are certain to lose. We will be driven out of the village, and then we will die. Even the elders of Ganra who were against fighting couldn't help but keep quiet. Then what should we do? What should we do to live, and inherit the will of Lord Jylan? What? Fight. Replied a lone, young goblin. The falling rain grew stronger, but gradually, that one voice spread amongst the goblins like fire, until eventually, all of Ganra was swallowed in it. I have to hand it to you, that was really something. After the meeting came to a pause, the leader of the Druids, Gi-za, called out to Gilmy. Gilmy never liked this goblin with a contrived smile and a human's appearance. Was that good enough? Asked Gilmy. But then again, he can't push him away either. After all, there's nothing to criticize about someone who's doing his best for his chief. Yes. My apologies if this sounds rude, but Lord Narsa is still too weak to lead Ganra. If you truly wish to support Lord Narsa, then it is wisest to first buy enough time for her to grow. That's true, but, it's fine to worry. That's a special privilege given to those with knowledge. But it won't do if you can't make a prompt decision because of it. There's no point to thinking if you can't act, and get the best results, right? Gilmy could only cast his eyes down as he searched for the words to speak, but before he could say anything, Gi-za continued. And besides, you've already taken the first step. Right now, the best path for you and your village is to fight and win. I know that. If we were to lose, the village would be destroyed. And Lord Narsa would, satisfied at Gilmy's answer, Gi-za nodded, and took his leave. Gilmy who was left behind could only hit his hand against a tree and wallow in his worries. He recalled Gi-za's words before the meeting began. You should take control of Ganra. If you don't, the king might just abandon you. Of course, the chief of the East now knew about the meteor Bao by Unii Bao. But what meaning is there if the tribe won't move according to his will? There wouldn't be any meaning at all. Gilmy understood that well. Which is why Gi-za's words had struck fear in his heart. The goblins of the eastern village were strong. And for that, Gilmy both admired and feared them. If they were to leave the war, Ganra would surely fall to the hands of Gaidga and Parajua. Especially to Parajua with their mobility that could easily let them run around their enemies. If they were to fight without the help of the eastern goblins, then this time, they might just be annihilated. If they are to save Ganra, which has already been driven to a corner, then there's no other choice but to fight and win. But there's still one thing bothering him. What is the chief of the East aiming for? He showed no signs of desire when Gilmy mentioned the elf princess. So why would he bother to save Ganra? An enigmatic existence. While he was deep in thought, a voice called out to him, snapping him back to reality. Gilmy, it said. It was his lord. Milad. I mean, chief. Seeing Gilmy kneel on one knee, Narsa couldn't help but shake her head and laugh, feeling a bit lonely. Just call me as usual. Why are you here, chief? Because I thought you'd be here. Me. Yes. Unconsciously, he raised his head. I played here a lot in the past, she said. You did, he replied. It was back when her father was still alive. When she received a bow, and competed with Gilmy. Those were warm memories. When Dad first picked you up, I thought I'd made a younger brother. Your words are wasted on this lowly one. You were amazing today. It felt like I was looking at my late father. I could never reach Master Jylan. Just the thought of being compared scares me. Hey Gilmy. As she leaned against the giant tree, she held in her hands the meteor bow. Is this village worth protecting to you? Those words pierced at her and his chest. Gilmy had always felt admiration for Narsa's father. But he passed away, and the one to succeed him was Narsa, who was raised like a sibling to him. But she was weaker than Gilmy. In her bow handling, and even in her leadership. It is worth protecting. No matter what the price may be, answered Gilmy as he looked straight into her eyes. Narsa met his gaze, and her gaze appeared both relieved and sad. Then I should give this to you, she said. It was the proof of being a chief in the village, the meteor bow, by Unii bow, Ganra's village will never wither and die, right, she said. And the one to carry this is the chief, don't say it anymore. I'm tired already. I'm weak. I'm not like you or that eastern chief. I can't become strong. Even back there in the meeting. I was just acting as a mouthpiece for the elders. As her cramped voice leaked, all the pain she's been hiding broke free, and Gilmy couldn't help but feel his chest ache. I can't accept this, he said. No matter what, she asked. You are the chief, Master Narsa. You cannot give that away. Narsa wants to retire now because of the hardship. But if she were to truly lose the title of chief, then she wouldn't have a home to come back to anymore. If so, then for what purpose would Gilmy continue to fight? But if it's possible. If I could ask for one thing, then I would like to receive the title of the first Archer Gladiator. If you want it, then I'll give it to you. You have that much strength after all. As Narsa looked up to the giant tree, she said to Gilmy. Hey, Gilmy. Am I good enough to be your chief? You are my pride. There is no one more fitting. I see. Yes. And like that, Ganra's night came to an end. The next day, the goblins from Ganra's village attacked the village of Gaidga. Volume 1, Chapter 57. Those who seek you are listening at novelfull.audio. Race. Goblin level. 8 class. Lord, Horde Chief possessed skills. Ruler of the Horde, Insurgent will, Overpowering Howl, Swordsmanship B+, Insatiable Desire, King's Soul, Ruler's Wisdom I, Eyes of the Blue Snake, Dance at Death's Border, Red Snake's Eye, Magic Manipulation, Soul of a Crazed Warrior, Third Impact, the Third Chant, Instinct, Ruler's Wisdom II, Divine Protection. Goddess of the Underworld Altesia attributes Darkness, Death Subordinate Beasts. Hi Kobold Jesu wink with a frown LV1, Gastra, LV20, Cynthia, LV20, Orc King Bui, LV36, it was at the base of a mountain, tall enough to split the heavens, within the darkness of a cave from which only a pitch-black crag could be seen, that the Gaidga goblins lived. From there, 3 days to the east was the village of Ganra Unknown Forest. And 2 days to the south were the plains and forests where the Parajua village lay. So that's the home of the Gaidga. Peeking from the forest, we could see the Gaidga goblins' large frames entering and exiting the cave incessantly. As we were watching, I noticed that the Gaidga goblins were carrying a big horn. That's the staple food of the Gaidga goblins, the big horn, Gilmy said. I thanked Gilmy for nonchalantly adding on that explanation while we continued to observe the Gaidga. What really caught my attention was that giant hole on the big horn's chest. The attack that left that gaping hole must have been fatal. It definitely wasn't done by a common goblin's strength. Not to mention that hole's actually as big as a small goblin. If that attack was dealt by someone from the Gaidgas, then I think I've been underestimating them a bit. It could be said that the reason we've been winning until now is because that goblin was yet to make his appearance. Is the chief the strongest goblin in Gaidga? I asked. Should be. Child of Mishra, Rashka. Even amongst the 4 tribes who administer their revered rituals of the gates of the underworld, he should be the strongest. Before I knew it, I was smiling. Well, isn't that interesting? Rashka of Gaidga. If we were to fight a battle of strength, will you lose? As I thought that to myself, I gave the signal to my subordinates. And we walked quietly, stealthily approaching that black cave to siege it. At the border of the forest and the woods lay the home of the Parajua. It wasn't hard to see why they chose this place for their home. They were goblins, so, of course, they built their homes within the forest. But by building them close to the border of the forest, where the plains were, they could easily hunt for food. Compared to Gaidga's cave and Ganra's natural fortress, the home of the Parajua was lacking in defense. True, they might have had fences around their village, but in the end, it was only made to keep the beast inside from being able to easily leave. It was an arrangement that didn't take enemies into consideration. But that wasn't Stretch, after all. Once a battle within Parajua broke, their goblins would all fight on Rider.Beastback, since every goblin in Parajua is given a beast at birth, to be ridden once they were old enough. Fighting on the back of a beast gives great mobility, but it is something completely foreign to the concept of holding a castle. In fact, it'd be better to just run with them, instead of trying to defend a siege. Because of that, the Parajua village does not have any good defenses. And it was that very village that a large goblin from Gaidga visited. Hanging from his neck could be seen a black, thorny amulet. This amulet was none other than the treasure of Gaidga, the Choker of Rathvidal amulet. It's an amulet that could increase the strength of its bearer. It is both a treasure and the proof of being the chief. In his hands was a club the size of the thick trunk of a tree. It was shaved at the end like a spear, so it could be said to be a wooden spear if not for its humongous size. His strong jaws seemed like they could swallow all the goblins around him. He wore no smile on his face, just a straight line. And on his eyes could be seen a dark glint, burning, seemingly there with those deep lines in between his brows just for the purpose of staring down his subordinates and enemies. A lone horn reaching for the heavens was on his forehead. And with his skin, brown, he was either a noble class or a duke class. The strongest goblin of the 4 tribes was currently on the receiving end of the Parajua chieftain's wrath. And how are you going to make up for this? The already aged glare of Alyahalia pierced sharply at the large goblin standing before him. Alyahalia did not falter in the slightest before that goblin that looked no different from an immovable boulder. In fact, he was so big that even if he were to fall over, Alyahalia would still have to look up. Because of this, Alyahalia had no choice but to ride on his Rider.Beast, just to meet this giant goblin's gaze. Sorry. A deep voice, carrying an apology with it, fell on Alyahalia's ears. The reason they were arguing was because of the defeat in the battle against Ganra. Although Rashka might have left everything to Alyahalia, a part of the Gadga goblins still went ahead to attack the Ganra, but was repelled. And then right as the Parajua were in the middle of demanding the Ganra's surrender, they were repelled again. Prove it. Alyahalia was only following Rashka's words, and his men were only following Parajua's officer, so Alyahalia wants Rashka to give him the head of that goblin as an apology. I can't. But that's impossible for Rashka. Because the goblin in charge, Reweka, was already dead. And goblins who managed to survive were all low-ranked ones, so they couldn't take Reweka's place. Brat, are you looking down on me? Of course, Alyahalia wouldn't just let this issue go. He is, after all, another chief leading his own tribe. If he were to just leave this be without receiving Rashka's apology, his image as a chief would be stained. The decision to form an alliance with the Gadga was mostly his. If Alyahalia fails to show the worth of that decision in good light, the next chief might just trample him underfoot. I'll give you 3 big horns. The big horns that the Gadga goblins ate have been decreasing lately. Very well. But if something like this were to happen again, you don't have to worry about that. The proud Alyahalia only formed an alliance with the Gadga for the sake of securing his tribe's survival. Their food supply was dwindling, their beasts were fewer. If they were to keep up at this rate, their tribe would surely be in danger. Sensing that, Alyahalia threw away his pride. He stifled his own heart, and he trampled underfoot his faith in exchange for food. Although it's just 3 big horns, considering the state of the village, it's still an important food supply. Enough of this topic. What are you going to do next? Alyahalia, who was in a bad mood, changed the topic, shooting a sharp gaze toward Rashka as he asked him that. We'll attack Ganra again. I'm gathering the subordinates I have spread out. I want them to go this time. Alyahalia snorted toward the direction of Ganra. A battle to annihilate, huh? As Alyahalia said those words, a lone goblin appeared within his mind. It was that goblin who was standing behind the princess of Ganra, Narsa. With 3 horns, grey skin, and even a tail, that majestic appearance of his was unlike any other goblin's. And with that great sword he wielded over his shoulders, the atmosphere about him was on a different league. Not to mention the sharpness within that scorching gaze of his. Alyahalia did not know why, but for some reason, that goblin had the power to move his heart with his words. If one were to mention an existence separate from normal goblins, only one existence would come to mind. And that is a king. Is he the king Alyahalia and Rashka had been waiting for? Or is he merely an impostor? No, it should still be too early for that salvation to come. Do you know the name of the goblin who came to Ganra's aid? Alyahalia asked. He wanted to know, what does this goblin that's like a boulder think of him? No, that sort of person, chief. A lone goblin ran toward them, frothing. What are you doing before a guest? Alyahalia yelled, but deep inside, he was perturbed. For his subordinate to be panicked to this extent, this was no trifle matter. Gadga village is under attack. Neither Alyahalia and Rashka could help but open their eyes wide. Has Kazan moved? What they feared the most was the movement of the Gordab goblins secluded in the north. But the enemy is Ganra. And the goblins from outside. What? Our discussion ends here. I'm returning. Even that normally calm voice of Rashka couldn't help but show a tinge of impatience in it. Hearing that, Alyahalia's lips curved. What did the enemy name himself? He didn't name himself anything in particular. He just demanded us to submit to the king. Absurd. Cracks appeared at that familiar club of Rashka. A king. Now, of all times. In his anger, Rashka struck his club into the ground, giving rise to tremors throughout the area. I'll come with you, Alyahalia said. Kid, call the others. We're going to war. It's too late already. Once the curtains on war has been drawn, it won't end until one side is annihilated. Attack Ganra. Alyahalia's words echoed throughout the village. And immediately, the riders of Parajua gathered. Author's note. It's the long-awaited guild war. I've also written about the requested impression from the enemy's side regarding the king's appearance. I wrote it from Alyahalia's perspective, who was affected by the king's charm toward those of his race. Volume 1, Chapter 58. The thrust of riposte. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Race. Goblin level. 8 class. Lord, Horde Chief possessed skills. Ruler of the Horde, Insurgent will, Overpowering Howl, Swordsmanship B+, Insatiable Desire, King's Soul, Ruler's Wisdom I, Eyes of the Blue Snake, Dance at Death's Border, Red Snake's Eye, Magic Manipulation, Soul of a Crazed Warrior, Third Impact, the Third Chant, Instinct, Ruler's Wisdom II, Divine Protection. Goddess of the Underworld Altesia Attributes. Darkness, Death Subordinate Beasts. High Kobold Hesu Wink with a Frown LV1, Gastra, LV20, Cynthia, LV20, Orc King Bui, LV36. After seeing the Gaidga goblins, I ordered my subordinates to pursue. Gi Za, take half of the goblins, and pursue the remaining enemy. Gi Zu, Gi Du, you all go as well. The Wind Magician, Gi Du. The Wide-eyed, Gig, the Mad Dog, Gi Zu. These goblins along with the normal goblins pursued the enemy. The interior of the cavern was wide, but it wasn't complicated. Inside were a number of caves used to store food as well as weapon and armors. After we succeeded in taking control of the most of the cavern, the Gaidga goblins ran away through the back, and I ordered my men to pursue them. The two noble goblins, Gi Gu Verbena and Gi Go Amatsuki, stayed behind to destroy the remnants of the cave. Some Gaidga goblins suddenly appeared, so I mowed them down with my great steel sword iron second. Next. After I finished sweeping the Gaidga goblins in the armory, I headed for the next cave. Giuyu. I killed the enemy that came out in one hit, then I went in to take a look. Inside were the goblin larvae and females of the Gaidga goblins. If you don't resist, I won't kill you, I told them. Female goblins are precious regardless of which tribe they come from. Besides, once the Gaidga become my subordinates, if their ability to reproduce is affected, then it'll take longer for them to become a part of my force. While it's true that goblins are able to reproduce quickly, it still takes time for larvae to become adult, and even more time until one can be called a warrior. Moreover, the time it takes for one of the 4 tribes goblin to reach adulthood is unknown. So there's no reason to kill the female goblins, and even killing the larvae is highly questionable. Besides, killing the weak and trembling Gaidga goblins would leave a bad aftertaste. King Gi Go, who was searching the other rooms, walked over to me as he swung around his blood-smeared curved blade. We've completely taken control of the cavern. This room here is the last one. I see, I replied. Then in that case, I order you, Gi Go Amatsuki. I looked down on the kneeling goblin as I signaled toward a cave. In this room are the larvae and females of the Gaidga. In the name of the king, I order you to ensure their safety. Protect these weak and frail goblins. By your will. I left the kneeling Gi Go, and went out of the cavern. Then leading the goblins gradually catching up, we left the Gaidga's home. Gilmy. We had sieged the cavern with Gilmy's archers in order to keep the battle from heading toward the cave, so Gilmy was outside the cave. I called out to him, the first archer Gadiata. We're chasing after the retreating Gaidga goblins, follow me. As you command. Gi Gu Verbena, run ahead, and open a path. Gig, watch the flanks. Go. The noble class goblin who specialized in cooperating, Gi Gu, served as the vanguard. To the right was the beast warrior Gigi, who was riding on a double head. To the left was the stealthy Gig. Like this we pursued the direction we thought the Gadga goblins would run to. King, the Gadga goblins most likely ran to the south. The south, huh? They might have run to the Parajua tribe's village. It was Gilmy who suggested where to go. The village of Parajua was probably already reflected on the eyes of that small archer. That gaze of his looking straight ahead was firm and resolute. Gradually, the trees grew less and less. Good, let's go to the south then. Gi Gu Verbena seemed to have heard my command as he slightly changed his direction. Having received the king's command, Gi Za led the horde to pursue the Gadga goblins. With the Gadga goblins' tall stature, Gi Za had little difficulty in following them. It was also easy to hit their large bodies. As they pursued the Gadga goblins, Gi Za relentlessly shot his magic while Gi Du aimed for their legs with his wind magic. The fallen Gadga goblins were struck by the wide-eyed Gig and Gi Zu with their swords and spears respectively. They hunted the Gadga goblins as if they were a flock of sheep. However, their numbers were nothing to scoff at. There were simply just too many of them, so it wasn't possible to completely annihilate the retreating goblins. Aim for the bigger clump. As they continued to pursue, the Gadga goblins clumped up. Gi Za ordered his men, and they killed the enemy goblins without so much as a glance. It was only when Gi Za's ether had grown low that he finally thought to finish things. Although he had been numbed to fatigue by the intoxication of killing the enemy, he and his men have still been pursuing for half a day already. His exhaustion was no mystery. Stop pursuing, Gi Za ordered. And the entire horde stopped. Within the horde could be seen goblins with ragged breath. So this is as far as we go, Gi Za muttered. Around that time, a different smell from the Gadga goblins wafted to his nose. But the only thing that could be heard was the eerie sound of wind rustling the trees. Gi Za felt that something was amiss. Immediately, he tried to order the goblins back, but before he could, a giant figure jumped out from the thickets. Tch. Parajua. It was a black tiger, giant and striped, upon which rode Parajua's Alyahalia, wielding a long spear. Die, brat. Without stopping a beat, he kept his momentum, and struck out with his spear. Gur, Gi Za jumped back, but Alyahalia wasn't about to let him go. Na.ve The moment Gi Za landed, Alyahalia struck out his spear again. My vessel is clad in the wind XL. His posture broken, by all means, that attack should have hit him. But Gi Za used XL, and with that, he was able to dodge. Riding on the wind, he ordered the goblins to retreat. Fall back. We're retreating. You're not going anywhere. Hal, Alashed, take their flanks. Jiru, run. Alyahalia chased after the now retreating Gi Za. As you command. The two goblins, Hal and Alashed, were like the wings of a bird spreading its wings as they tried to surround Gi Za and his men. As Alyahalia called out the name of his beast, the black tiger set its sights on Gi Za and it bellowed out a powerful cry. The combined attacks of goblins and beast left even the dexterous druids at a loss. The most they could do was dodge. Tear apart the enemy to the right. Come. At the wide-eyed Gig's voice, the wind magician, Gi Du, used his magic, toppling over a rider to the right. But the beast riders continued to ride unbridled as they tried to surround the goblins. You're annoying. Gig turned to his back, and received the attacks of the weak goblins. He fought in the same way they did when hunting large preys. I'll go. Gi Zu's spear resounded as he spun it and pierced the enemy. Giuyu. He bellowed out a cry like that of beasts, activating skill. Gi Zu had removed the constraints of reason to open a path to survival. It was because Gig understood that he didn't try to stop that reckless action. Run. Run. Keep running. Jiaiza shouted words of encouragement to uplift the morale of the entire horde as they retreated deep into the forest. Bending his body in between the shorter trees, he ran away desperately from the tiger's pursuit. Fortunately, goblins were small, so the Parajua goblins who were riding on the beasts couldn't attack the places they couldn't fit into. Retreat, Jiaizu. As Jiaiza dodged Alyahalia's spear and Jiru's fang, he repeatedly called out to Jiaizu, but Jiaizu had already lost his reason, and Jiaiza's voice couldn't reach him. Don't look away during a fight. While Jiaiza was distracted, Alyahalia's spear came for him. Goo! He twisted his body to dodge it, but it still pierced his shoulder. Humph! Alaliha was about to scorn Jiaiza, but before he could say anything, Jiaiza chanted, "My heart rides on the Windwindia." The air shook, and 4 tornadoes suddenly appeared around Jiaiza. Jiaiza fired those 4 tornadoes toward Alyahalia. Like that'll hit, new. Jirua jumped, and Alyahalia was able to get away scot-free. But one of the tornadoes hit the ground, whirling up a cloud of dust, blocking Alyahalia's sight. TCH. Looks like this is as far as we go, Jirua. Although the black tiger could still move nimbly within the forest and attack with its fangs, its nose was too weak. Once its vision was cut, its ability to attack would also greatly fall. Well, whatever. At least we were able to do them some damage. We're going back. As Alyahalia said that to himself, he ordered his subordinates to retreat. Should we decapitate the survivors? Haru asked. Alyahalia shook his head. There's something I want to check. If there's any who are still alive, take them with us. But don't bother being courteous. As you will. Led by Alyahalia, Parajua quietly left the battlefield to rendezvous with the Gaidga. Protagonist has leveled up. Level 8. Level 10. Author's note. Looks like Jiaiza had the carpet pulled under him. Hal's and Alash's beasts are named Mio and Shio. When naming Alyahalia's rider.beast, I was torn between Kokugu, King Go, and Rao, Ra King. But those 2 names both sounded too heroic, so I changed my mind.